The bread ration is 125 grams. That's it. That's all you get. A slice of something that barely qualifies as bread, black, wet, dense with sawdust and cellulose and whatever else they could grind into it, and you hold it in your hands like it's sacred, because it is. Because people are dying for less. Because your neighbor died for less yesterday, in the apartment next to yours. And nobody came to take the body for 3 days because nobody had the strength. This is Leningrad, winter 1941. And the city is already dead. It just doesn't know it yet. If you've ever wanted to understand what human beings are truly capable of, not in moments of glory, but in moments of absolute, grinding, impossible desperation, then stay with me. Because what happened inside this city over 872 days of siege is one of the most extraordinary and heartbreaking stories in all of human history. A story that most of the world still doesn't fully know. Hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started. It begins, as so many catastrophes do, with a miscalculation. By September 1941, the German Army Group North had swept across Eastern Europe with terrifying momentum. Hitler's Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history, had torn through Soviet defenses like paper. And now the Wehrmacht stood at the gates of Leningrad, the jewel of the Soviet Union, the city that Peter the Great had built from a swamp to be the window of Russia onto the world. Hitler didn't want to take the city, not at first. He wanted to erase it. The order was simple and monstrous in equal measure. Encircle it, cut off its supply lines, and let it die on its own. No costly street-by-street fighting, no mercy, just a slow, deliberate strangulation. The Führer believed that starvation would do what bullets could not, break the will of a people, collapse a city from the inside out, and deliver Leningrad into ruin without a single German soldier needing to enter its streets. What he did not count on was the city fighting back, not with tanks, not with air power, but with something far more dangerous: stubbornness, pride, and a terrifying refusal to disappear. On September 8, 1941, the last land road out of Leningrad was cut. The ring closed. 3 million people, soldiers, civilians, children, artists, scientists, factory workers, were sealed inside a city with roughly 1 month's worth of food. Think about that. 1 month. The Luftwaffe had already bombed the Badayev warehouses, the city's central food storage, in one of the opening moves of the siege. Thick black smoke rose over Leningrad for days as sugar, flour, meat, and butter burned. People came afterward and scraped the sweetened earth where the sugar had melted into the soil. They boiled it, they ate it. Because already, even in those first weeks, they understood that what was coming would be unlike anything they had experienced before. The winter of 1941 arrived early and with particular cruelty. Temperatures plunged to -30, the city's pipes froze, its electricity failed, and the food, what little remained, began to run out faster than anyone had dared to calculate. The ration cards came, and with them, the mathematics of survival. Party officials and manual laborers received more. Dependents, the old, the young, those who weren't working, received the least. 125 grams. That is not enough to survive on. That is a number designed by desperation, not nutrition. And yet, for hundreds of thousands of Leningraders, 125 grams was the difference between life and the frozen ground. The city began to eat itself. Not metaphorically, literally. Wallpaper was stripped from walls and boiled. The paste behind it contained starch. Leather belts and boots were softened in water and chewed. Pets vanished. The pigeons disappeared. People discovered that certain types of wood pulp, when ground and mixed with whatever scraps remained, could form something loosely resembling bread. Library paste, industrial grease, linseed oil, anything that could be metabolized, anything that could keep the body moving for one more day, was consumed. And still, people died. At the peak of the famine in January and February of 1942, the city was losing between 3,000 and 4,000 people every single day. The bodies piled up outside apartment buildings because there was no fuel to heat the crematoria, no horses to pull the sleds to the cemeteries, and no surviving family members with enough strength to dig through 3 feet of frozen earth. Children's sleds became hearses. The dead were wrapped in whatever cloth was available, bed sheets, curtains, and dragged through the snow-covered streets by people who looked like walking skeletons themselves. And yet, in the Leningrad Philharmonic Hall in August of 1942, an orchestra performed. Dmitri Shostakovich had begun composing his 7th symphony, the Leningrad Symphony, during the early days of the siege, before he was evacuated from the city. He dedicated it to Leningrad. And so, when the decision was made to perform it inside the besieged city itself, it became something more than music. It became a statement. Some of the musicians had to be brought in from the front lines. Others were pulled from hospitals. The conductor, Karl Eliasberg, had been so weakened by starvation that he could barely lift his baton. The orchestra that assembled was a collection of half-dead men and women in threadbare concert attire. And when they played, as Soviet loudspeakers broadcast the symphony across the front lines toward the German positions, the city wept. Because survival is not only about calories and body temperature, it is about meaning, about the insistence that you are still a human being, even when everything around you is trying to reduce you to an animal. Leningrad understood this instinctively. The libraries stayed open. The scientists at the Institute of Plant Industry, sitting on one of the world's largest seed collections, a priceless repository of agricultural genetics, watched their colleagues starve to death rather than eat the seeds they were guarding. They died protecting the future of food, surrounded by food, because some things are more important than survival. How do you even begin to process that? The only lifeline the city had was the Doroga Zizny, the road of life. Lake Ladoga, which sat just to the east of the encirclement, froze thick enough in winter to drive trucks across. Soviet drivers ran convoys across the ice under German artillery and air attack, carrying supplies in and evacuating civilians out. Trucks fell through the ice. Drivers drowned in the freezing water, but the convoys kept moving because if they stopped, the city stopped. In summer, boats made the crossing. The supply was never enough, but it was something. It was a thread, thin as silk, strong enough to hold. The Siege of Leningrad finally broke on January the 27th, 1944. 872 days after it began. When Soviet forces opened a corridor through the German lines, when the first trains rolled into the city again, Leningraders came out into the streets and stood in silence. Not because they didn't feel anything, but because what they felt was too large for sound. The official death toll from the siege is listed at around 800,000 civilians. Some historians believe the true number exceeds 1 million, possibly more. The dead lie in mass graves at Piskoyevskoy Cemetery, 500,000 in one place alone, beneath granite slabs and the simple, devastating words, "Here lie Leningraders." Here is what I keep coming back to, long after the numbers and the dates and the names have settled. The Germans believed that hunger would shatter human beings, that when you reduce a person to their most basic biological needs, food, warmth, survival, the higher things fall away. Art, community, defiance, love. They believed that civilization was a luxury, not a core. Leningrad proved them wrong. Not entirely, not cleanly. There were crimes committed inside those walls too, things done in desperation that no one speaks of proudly. Human beings are not saints, but the city held. It played symphonies while it starved. It guarded seeds while it died. It carved a road across a frozen lake and called it the Road of Life, because that is exactly what it was. What does it take to be that? What is it inside certain people, inside certain cities, that simply refuses to be extinguished? I don't have a clean answer, but I think that's exactly why we need to keep asking.